Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving deep into the world of tech today, specifically Microsoft and Apple in the age of AI.
Oh, yeah.
It's a hot topic.
Definitely a hot topic and a really interesting one, especially with the source material we have.
Right, an excerpt from a Korean text.
Mm-hmm.
And it translates to AI era, Microsoft and Apple's innovation and stagnation.
Yeah, I mean, just that title alone really gets you thinking.
It does. It kind of sets the stage for this, like, almost rivalry.
Yeah.
You know?
It does, and what's so fascinating is it seems like things have flipped.
Totally. Like, remember when Microsoft was like the big boring company?
Yeah.
And Apple was the cool innovator?
Right, exactly. Like, you think about Apple's history.
Uh-huh.
The Mac, the iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, each one was like, bam.
Revolutionary.
It's a game changer.
And at that same time, like, what was Microsoft doing?
Just Windows.
Windows. It was all about Windows.
And, like, being kind of ruthless in business.
Powerful for sure,
Yeah.
but not necessarily innovative.
Right, but now.
Now it's like they've switched places completely. Microsoft is the one pushing the boundaries with AI and quantum computing, and Apple's putting out a cheaper iPhone.
The iPhone 16, yeah.
Yeah, with like the big new feature being an in-house modem.
It's interesting how the source highlights that contrast.
Yeah, and it's not just like a random opinion piece.
No.
This is like a well-researched text.
Absolutely. It digs deep into the history of both companies.
And it's got me thinking, like, how did this happen? How did Microsoft go from, like, the slow giant to the innovator?
Yeah, and it's not just about AI. They're doing some crazy things with quantum computing, too.
That's the part that really blows my mind. Like, just on February 19th, 2025,
Yeah.
Microsoft announces a major breakthrough in quantum computing, and on that same day, Apple's like, here's the iPhone 16.
It really highlights the different paths they're on.
Okay, but before we go any further,
Yeah.
can we just, like, back up for a second?
Sure.
What is quantum computing? Like, I know it's complicated, but it seems important.
It is. It is. Okay, so imagine a computer that's like exponentially faster than anything we have now.
Okay.
It can solve problems that are impossible for normal computers.
Where?
And that's because it uses the principles of quantum mechanics.
Quantum mechanics.
Right.
Physics.
Exactly. It's like a whole different level of computing.
Wow. So Microsoft is making a computer that's like powered by physics.
Kind of, yeah. It's super complex, but that's the basic idea.
That's insane. So it's not just like making things a bit faster.
No, it's like a whole new paradigm.
So they're not just playing catch up. They're like defining the future.
Exactly. And the source makes this really interesting point.
Okay.
Microsoft has been investing in quantum computing since the early 2000s.
Really?
Yeah. They've been playing the long game while everyone else was focused on the short term.
Wow. That's some serious vision.
It is. And it makes you wonder, like, what else have they been working on behind the scenes?
Right. Like, how do they even make this shift? Didn't they used to be all about Windows?
They did, and that's actually a big part of their story.
Okay, I'm listening.
So the source argues that Microsoft's transformation really began with Satya Nadella.
The CEO.
Yeah, he took over in 2014, and he wasn't tied to the legacy of Windows in the same way as his predecessors.
So he was able to make like bolder moves.
Exactly. One of the first things he did was shift the focus away from Windows and towards cloud computing.
Cloud computing.
Yeah, basically it's like renting processing power and storage from massive data centers instead of relying on your own hardware.
Interesting. So instead of selling software, they're selling a service.
Exactly. It was a huge departure from their previous model.
And it was a smart move. Everyone's using the cloud now.
Right. And then, of course, there's their massive investment in AI.
Oh, yeah, like Microsoft Copilot.
Exactly. They partnered with OpenAI and have been pouring resources into AI development.
I use Copilot all the time. It's amazing.
It is. And knowing that they've also been working on quantum computing for all these years just makes their current success even more impressive.
It's like they were quietly building the foundation for the AI revolution while everyone else was just figuring things out.
That's a great way to put it. And it really challenges our assumptions about what innovation looks like.
Totally. So while Microsoft was busy transforming what was happening over at Apple, were they keeping up with all these changes?
Well, that's the question we're going to explore next.
Ooh, this is getting good. Okay, let's dive into Apple's side of the story. Okay, so we've got Microsoft embracing the future, but what about Apple? This excerpt seems to suggest they've lost their innovative edge, especially since Steve Jobs passed away back in 2011.
Well, it's not like they've been doing nothing. The Apple Watch and AirPods have been really successful.
True, but those feel more like refinements than revolutions.
Yeah.
Right? Like making things better, sleeker, more user-friendly.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point.
But not really groundbreaking.
Right. And to understand this shift, I think it helps to look back at how these companies earn their reputations.
Okay, let's go back in time.
So the source uses this really interesting analogy to describe Microsoft in its early days.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
It says they were like a man with a hammer who sees every problem as a nail.
Okay, so in Microsoft's case, that hammer was Windows,
Exactly. They used Windows to dominate every market they entered.
even if it wasn't always the best fit.
Sometimes, yeah. The source gives examples like Lotus 123, which was the leading spreadsheet software,
Uh-huh.
and WordPerfect, the go-to word processor back then.
Oh, yeah, I remember WordPerfect.
Both were essentially overtaken by Microsoft's aggressive tactics.
That's kind of ruthless.
It was effective, though, at least for a while.
But then what happened?
Well, the author argues that this very strategy eventually led to Microsoft's stagnation.
How so?
The world was changing, the internet was exploding, and Microsoft was still too fixated on Windows. They missed out on early opportunities in search, social media, all these emerging online platforms.
Like they were so focused on what had worked before that they couldn't adapt.
Exactly, and the source mentions some of their unsuccessful attempts to branch out.
Like what?
Their early mobile operating system, for one.
Oh, right. I think I vaguely remember that.
And the Zune music player.
Oh, yeah, the Zune. That was supposed to be the iPod killer.
Exactly, but both flopped, costing them billions.
Wow. So that's Microsoft's story, early dominance, followed by a period of stagnation. What about Apple? You mentioned they were the complete opposite during this time.
Yeah, the source contrasts Bill Gates, who was leading Microsoft at the time, with Steve Jobs.
Who had just returned to Apple.
Right. In the late 90s, Jobs was described as this impatient innovator, always pushing for the next big thing.
He was obsessed with creating something new and groundbreaking.
Totally. He refused to dwell on past successes.
And that approach clearly worked. The iPod, the iPhone, the iPad, they all created entirely new markets.
And it wasn't just about making existing technology better. It was about changing how people interacted with technology.
And that's the key difference, right? While Microsoft was struggling to adapt to the internet, Apple was thriving. They saw the potential of mobile devices and online services early on.
And they weren't afraid to cannibalize their own products to create something new.
Which is kind of ironic, considering how protective Apple is of its ecosystem now.
Yeah, it's like they've become the very thing they were rebelling against.
It's interesting how things come full circle.
It speaks to the cyclical nature of innovation. What's disruptive can become entrenched over time.
So while Microsoft was going through this major transformation under Nadella, embracing cloud computing and AI, Apple seems to have taken a different approach.
Right. The source suggests that since Jobs' passing, Apple hasn't really had a true game-changer product.
They've had successes, but mostly refinements of existing ideas.
Exactly. Like, the Apple Watch is great, but it's not a revolution.
And their AI strategy seems to be a major point of contention.
Definitely. The source mentions Apple Intelligence.
Which was supposed to be their answer to ChatGPT and Copilot.
Right, but it sounds like it's been delayed and might not even be that impressive.
And that delay is a problem in the fast-paced world of AI.
Absolutely. Every month counts. The longer Apple waits, the further behind they fall.
So we know Microsoft has been investing in quantum computing for over 2 decades. What about Apple? Are they exploring any radical new technologies?
That's where things get interesting. The source doesn't really delve into Apple's long-term research and development.
They're pretty secretive about that stuff.
Exactly. So it's hard to say what their long game might be.
It's possible they have some groundbreaking projects in the works that we don't even know about.
Totally. Maybe they're playing a different game altogether.
So if they're not chasing the latest trends, what are they focused on? What's their strategy?
Well, to understand that, I think we need to look beyond just the technology and consider the bigger picture.
Okay, help me connect the dots here.
Yeah.
What's the bigger picture? All right, so we talked about Microsoft charging ahead and Apple maybe taking it a bit slower. What does all this mean for, like, the average person? What's the big takeaway here?
Well, this source doesn't exactly give us like a simple answer, but it brings up some really important questions.
Like what?
Well, it emphasizes how much AI is becoming a part of our lives. Like, whether we realize it or not, AI is everywhere.
Yeah, true. It's in our social media feeds, our voice assistants, like it's everywhere.
Exactly. And the source argues that companies that are really embracing AI and putting resources into it, they're going to have a huge advantage in the future.
And Microsoft seems to be all over that.
They are, while Apple's approach seems a little more hesitant.
But couldn't you say that Apple focusing on user experience is a kind of innovation too? Like Maybe they're not leading in AI research, but they're making products that people love to use.
That's a good point. Apple is known for making things sleek and intuitive and easy to use. That's definitely valuable. But the question is, can that be enough to stay competitive in a world where AI is becoming so central to everything?
Right, it's like the million-dollar question. Do they have the vision to be a leader in the AI age? Or are they, like this source suggests, underestimating how fast things are changing?
The source seems to think they might be underestimating it. Yeah, it argues that in the AI era, standing still is basically moving backwards.
Because the technology is evolving so quickly.
Exactly. Even a small delay can put you behind.
But Apple has so much money, though. Couldn't they just buy their way into the AI game, like acquire some startups or something?
They could. And to be fair, we don't know everything that's going on at Apple. They're super secretive about their research and development.
True. Maybe they have some top-secret AI project that's going to blow everyone away.
It's possible. But even if they do, the delay with releasing something like ChatGPT or Copilot is a little worrying. Those tools are already changing how people work.
Yeah, by the time Apple gets something out there, will it be too late?
It's a risk for sure. And it raises an interesting question. Is Apple's plan to play catch-up, or are they waiting to unleash something totally new?
Ooh, like maybe they're working on something we haven't even imagined yet.
Exactly. It wouldn't be the first time Apple surprised everyone.
They've pulled it off before.
But the tech world is way more competitive now. There are more players, things move faster, the stakes are higher.
So can Apple really afford to wait and see?
That's the question. We'll have to
Yeah.
see how it all plays out.
Well, this deep dive has definitely given me a lot to think about. It's not just about two companies. It's about innovation and adapting, and the dangers of getting complacent.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I think the takeaway is this. In the age of AI, staying informed is more important than ever. Knowing what's happening and being open to change.
Whether you're a techie or just someone who uses technology every day, the future is being shaped right now.
And we all have a role to play in it.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay, shoot.
What if this whole thing with Apple seeming behind is actually a sign of their confidence? Like, what if they're so sure of their future that they don't need to rush into this AI race?
Interesting. You're saying maybe they think they can change the game on their own terms?
Exactly. Or maybe they're totally wrong and they're underestimating AI. We'll just have to wait and see.
The story's not over yet, that's for sure. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep asking questions.